It is easy to believe that we see the world clearly. Yet most of us are seeing through a body that learned long ago what danger looks like. The world mirrors our inner state before it mirrors reality. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are taking a really fascinating and I think profound look at the filters we all carry.
The invisible lenses, right? The ones created by our past.
Exactly. And they profoundly color the reality we encounter every single day. We sort of assume what we see is the objective truth. But what if? What if the landscape outside is actually just reflecting the tension or the expectation or the history that's stored inside our own nervous system?
That is the core idea that guided this entire deep dive. It's inspired by the writer Helen Mudiba in her reflection, "The World Sees You How You See It."
It's a powerful title.
It is. And she explores the biological speed with which the mind can jump from just a neutral observation to a fully formed, often catastrophic narrative.
And it is so immediately relatable. I mean, think about that scenario we all know. You get a clipped text message.
Oh, yeah. The one-word answer.
Right. Or maybe it's just shorter than usual. Or there's a bit of a delay in the response to something you thought was important. Instantly, before your brain even has time to form a logical thought.
Your chest constricts.
Yes. Or your jaw might clench. There's a physical reaction.
That physical response is the giveaway. The mind doesn't wait around for facts. It fills that gap, that silence or absence, with a story.
They're mad at me.
I'm being rejected.
I failed somehow.
Exactly. And the nervous system, which is really only trained for survival, it responds to that absence, the silence, the delay, the tone, as if it were a direct physical threat.
So we're projecting the past onto the present. Those colors borrowed from old hurts, a childhood thing, a betrayal at work, they just suddenly paint the now.
And we're mistaking a physiological reaction for external, irrefutable reality.
That's the key.
It's the difference between noticing a text was short, which is a neutral fact, and interpreting that shortness as proof of rejection, which is a whole complex story written entirely by the protective parts of your mind.
Using trauma as its pen, as the article put it.
Precisely.
So before we go any further, I just want to invite you, our listener, to use this as a little micro practice.
Yeah, there you go.
As we talk about these concepts, anticipation, fear, reaction, just notice what's happening in your own body. Do you feel a tightening anywhere?
Or maybe a softening in your shoulders.
Is your breath shallow? Are you bracing? Or is there a kind of curious openness, that immediate feedback from your body? That's where the learning begins.
And our mission today, drawing from this reflection, is to explore exactly how the world shifts when our inner landscape shifts.
Long before our life circumstances actually change.
Right. We're looking at the mechanics of how our perception can widen, simply by learning to stop bracing.
And to guide this exploration, we're grounding ourselves in two, I think, incredibly powerful and complementary frameworks. They help us map this internal experience.
First, we have the pathway to sovereignty. It's a framework we visited before, describing 6 nonlinear inner levels, and it charts that journey from pure reaction to a more considered response.
And these are states of being, right? Not like a permanent destination you arrive at.
Exactly. And second, we have a very practical tool for that in-the-moment intervention. It's called the calm practice.
This is the gentle pause we can apply right in that moment where we feel our perception starting to narrow.
And we pronounce that C-A-L-M as the single word calm. It's an acronym designed to interrupt that reflex loop.
So what does it stand for?
Check the story. Acknowledge the impulse. Locate the state. Is this fear, habit, or clarity? And then move wisely.
That sequence. It seems so simple on paper, but I think the real complexity is in that microsecond between the stimulus and the response.
That's the transformative space.
And it's where most of us fail, right? We jump straight from the stimulus to trying to move wisely without checking or locating a single thing.
We skip all the important internal steps. And just for quick context on the pathway to sovereignty, remember those 6 levels.
Okay, a quick refresher.
1 is survival pure reactivity, fight, flight, freeze.
Yeah.
2 is seeking stability. That's the busy work. Perfectionism, trying to control the external to feel safe. 3, self-awareness. This is where we start noticing our patterns, naming the state, recognizing the filter. Then integrity, wholeness, and finally freedom, which is about agency and choice.
And the full summary is, of course, in the show notes for anyone who wants to go deeper.
Right. Today, we're really focusing on how those early shifts, especially moving from survival up into self-awareness, profoundly shape what we're even able to perceive in the world.
Which brings us right back to the core thesis of the piece. The moment we notice how our perception is narrowing, That's the moment we begin to reclaim the capacity to see more clearly.
It's the recognition that a filter is even present. That's the first necessary step to adjusting it.
Okay, so let's get into the mechanism of this idea of bracing versus steadiness.
Let's delve into the biology of it because it's so important to get that this isn't a failure of character. It's a nervous system mechanism.
Biology.
It is. When we talk about perception narrowing, we are talking about the physical state of the body being braced.
And what does that actually mean physiologically? We hear the word bracing all the time, but what's really happening inside us that makes the world suddenly feel so hostile?
That's a great question. The nervous system, especially the really ancient parts of it, is wired to respond instantly to the possibility of threat.
So not even a real threat, just the possibility.
Just the hint of one. When we're braced, the body physically tightens. Shoulders rise, breath gets shallow and stays up in the chest. The jaw clenches.
Okay.
And this physical bracing actually restricts blood flow to the higher processing centers of the brain, like the prefrontal cortex.
So our rational brain is literally running on less blood and oxygen. It can't handle nuance or complexity in that state.
It can't. It only has the resources for the simplest, fastest conclusion, which is danger.
Wow.
So when you're in that survival state, the world has to appear hostile. Perception dramatically narrows, and it only focuses on data points that confirm the danger script.
And it ignores everything else.
It entirely ignores anything that might suggest safety or collaboration. That initial caution, which was probably a wise protective mechanism from years ago, it quickly morphs into pervasive fear.
The article calls it fear wearing a business suit. I love that.
It's a great line because it looks professional, it sounds reasonable, but underneath, it's just raw fear.
And the cost of this bracing is it's exponential. If I'm braced, every challenge becomes an ambush.
Every difference of opinion becomes a conflict.
You lose the capacity for nuance completely. You're just running a worst-case scenario script on a loop.
Yes, and that script becomes the only reality available to your mind. You lose the ability to tell the difference between a structural constraint and a malicious attack.
Or between someone just having a bad day and a personal rejection of you.
Exactly. But this leads us to the other side of it, the expanding effect. If bracing is a physical state, the shift out of it must also be physical first.
That makes sense.
Absolutely. When the body softens, when you consciously drop your shoulders, when your breath deepens and slows, when the nervous system downregulates, the world literally expands.
Nuance returns.
The nuance comes flooding back. You can suddenly hear a colleague's clipped email tone, not as disapproval of my work, but as tiredness due to a deadline.
So the core insight here is that regulation comes before insight. You cannot think your way to clarity if your body is screaming danger.
You have to tend to the internal state first.
Safety comes before perspective.
Wholeness comes before interpretation. If I'm stabilized, I perceive possibility, or at the very least, I perceive reality without the distortion of my old fears.
But if I'm in a survival state,
You perceive threat. Your physical state dictates your capacity for accurate perception. Full stop.
that's such a vital distinction. If I want a wider view of my life or my career, I shouldn't start by trying to solve the external problem.
You should start by checking your posture and your breath.
It starts there.
The softening is the catalyst. It's
Yeah.
the micro-intervention before you can even think about the major intervention.
Okay, so let's take that invitation out to our listener right now. Where in your life do you tend to expect threat before you expect possibility?
Good question.
Where does your body decide that the answer is always the negative one before the evidence has even arrived? Keep that question close as we look at 3 really specific character journeys that were in that reflection by Helen Mudeba.
Yeah, these show exactly how the nervous system writes the script for our external reality.
These 3 examples are so vivid, they really illustrate how our past experience sets up a perception filter that just dictates everything.
Let's start with the first character, Samir. His filter was mistrust.
Samir's core experience was these early, significant betrayals. He had a business partner who financially ruined him.
So his body learned a very severe lesson.
Trust is dangerous. People always have hidden motives.
And that trauma showed up as a constant state of hypervigilance. It locked him right into that survival state on the pathway. He wasn't a cynical person by nature, but his body treated every interaction, every contract, every email as a potential ambush.
So if an email was delayed, it wasn't because the other person was busy.
No, it was because they were withholding information, they were plotting.
He was always reading between the lines, anticipating the hidden maneuver, the betrayal he was sure was coming.
And the cost of that was huge. He often missed what was actually written in plain sight because he was so busy searching for a non-existent subtext.
He would have called it being strategic or just being a realist.
Right. But like the piece points out, what he called realism was just fear in that business suit. His body was constantly braced, prepared for dishonesty, and so
Honesty is what he found.
even when it wasn't there,
Yeah.
he was projecting his old wound onto absolutely everyone he met.
And his collapse point was a complex legal dispute. The dispute itself was high stakes, but what really unraveled him was realizing his own reaction.
His aggressive defensive interpretations, his preemptive striking.
It wasn't coming from the facts of the case. It was coming from that decade-old betrayal. He was fighting a ghost.
Not the current opponent. And a powerful catalyst helped him shift. There was a mediator who focused not on the legal strategy, but on Samir's visible exhaustion.
His defensiveness.
Right. The mediator helped him see the energy drain and pointed out, your body is writing a story that precedes every fact presented to you.
Wow.
And Samir realized he had to manage his own state, his hypervigilance, before he could ever hope to manage the negotiation. The vigilance wasn't preventing the hurt, it was actively creating conflict.
So if you're listening, the deep reflection here is, where do you assume disappointment or betrayal before the evidence appears? Where does your body decide the outcome is negative before the facts are in?
Let's move to the second character, Chandra. Her filter was judgment.
Chandra's pattern is rooted in a fear of inadequacy, a quiet terror of being found insufficient.
So she was in constant surveillance mode, scanning her environment for signs of approval or, more often, disapproval.
She saw silent verdicts everywhere, in every pause, every glance.
Her survival mode showed up as this intense, immediate self-blame and these spiraling thoughts. Her drive wasn't healthy ambition, it was a desperate attempt to stay ahead of the fear.
The fear that if she ever stopped proving herself, she would finally be exposed as not enough.
And this drove her squarely into that seeking stability level. It looked like overperformance and over-explanation, always trying to control other people's perceptions of her.
And the collapse arrived during a difficult workplace conflict. A project she poured herself into was criticized publicly with language that felt really harsh and personal.
And she spiraled instantly, drafting endless emails packed with justifications, trying to control the narrative of her own competency.
She just assumed the criticism meant she was incompetent. Her reputation was ruined.
She wasted weeks of sleep and energy, completely locked inside this story her nervous system had written, the eternal narrative that she was always one misstep away from complete failure.
And then came the stark revelation.
Yeah. Weeks later, she learned the colleague who had criticized her so sharply was dealing with a massive, severe family crisis.
It had nothing to do with her.
It had absolutely nothing to do with the quality of her work. Their sharpness was entirely about their own overwhelm and external stress.
But her nervous system was so primed and prepared for rejection that it just manufactured the evidence.
It took a neutral event and twisted it to confirm the established negative story. She mistook an external mood for an internal verdict on her worth.
And her catalyst was twofold. First, a friend's really gentle, simple observation. You know, not everything is about you.
Oof, that can hit hard.
It's humbling, but it's also incredibly liberating. And second, an honest conversation with her colleague finally allowed her to pause and check the story she'd been accepting as fact.
It's amazing how much energy we expend trying to manage external perception, it's largely futile.
So for you, the listener, when have you confused someone else's behavior, their bad mood, their stress, with a verdict on your inherent worth?
And that brings us to our third character, Lucas. His filter was oppression.
Lucas's survival state was activated by large impersonal systems. He saw bureaucracies, institutions, hierarchies.
As inherently flawed and oppressive, his body was wired for a constant fight response.
Which showed up as this pervasive anger and the unwavering assumption of bad intent. Every administrative change felt like a personal attack on his autonomy.
And this constant fighting posture just drained his reserves and often alienated the very people he needed to collaborate with.
And his anger was often a shield. It externalized this deep, persistent feeling of powerlessness that went all the way back to childhood.
It's easier to rage against the invisible enemy of the system than to feel the vulnerability of being powerless.
His collapse point was when a structural failure happened, and it revealed the real reasons were complexity, resource constraints, human error, budget limits.
Not just malice. He had to confront the reality that what he was fighting wasn't a singular villain, but a complex, imperfect structure made of fallible people.
His approach in that seeking stability state was just to try and force solutions through sheer intensity and argument.
He pushed harder, he argued louder, which only led to his own exhaustion and, crucially, increased resistance from the system.
Which then confirmed his original fear that the system was the enemy he had to fight. It's a perfect feedback loop.
A perfect draining loop. His catalyst was being introduced to systems thinking and mapping circles of influence, which we're about to discuss.
It helped him see the immense cost of fighting every single thing. He realized most of his energy was being spent outside the bounds of what he could actually affect.
He needed to move from this generalized rage at the structure to building effective bridges with the people inside the structure. A fight posture is exhausting, but collaboration, even within constraints, is generative.
So, a final reflection for the listener. Where are you spending energy fighting a world that is not actually fighting you, but merely existing in its complex, flawed reality?
And all three of these patterns, Samir's mistrust, Chandra's judgment, Lucas's rage, they all point to the same problem.
Which is what?
When the nervous system writes the script, it automatically directs our energy toward the places where we feel the most helpless. And that's why this framework of the three circles is such an invaluable tool.
Okay, let's unpack these three circles to really understand this energetic train. We're talking about where we put our most valuable resource, which is our attention.
So we divide reality into three domains. The first is the circle of control. This is the smallest circle, the realm of personal sovereignty.
And what's in it?
Only our own thoughts, our own actions, and our responses. That's it. Everything else is outside.
Okay. Then the second circle?
The circle of influence. This is the middle space. What we can affect but cannot dictate. Relationships, collaborative outcomes, team morale.
Persuasive advocacy.
Right. We can offer input, but we can't guarantee the result.
And the third circle, the big one.
The circle of no influence. Everything beyond our reach. Other people's feelings, systemic structures, the past, the weather, all the uncontrollable variables of life.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because the critique pointed out that the circle of no influence is incredibly seductive.
It is. When the body is in that survival loop, braced and fearing danger, our attention naturally floods that circle of no influence.
Why? Why do we do that?
Because the nervous system, which is desperately seeking safety through control, latches onto the most uncontrollable elements. We obsess over what we can't change because the very act of thinking about it makes us feel productive, even when we are entirely ineffective.
We mistake obsession for preparation. We're trying to force certainty in a world that is fundamentally uncertain.
And this just leads to that draining, demoralizing loop. The effort is poured into these immovable objects. Let's look at it with our characters.
Okay, so Samir was a prime example. He was consumed by what the opposing party might do, rehearsing aggressive arguments against moves that hadn't even been made.
He exhausted himself trying to control the outcome and their perception of him. A massive effort, all in the circle of no influence.
And Chandra. Her energy drain was just as powerful. She spent countless hours replaying the criticism, trying to decode her colleagues' thoughts, constructing these narratives about her own worth.
She was trying to force external validation, which is definitively outside the circle of control.
And Lucas. He spent so much energy raging against abstract institutional policies.
He confused his valid critique with the idea that he could single-handedly control or dismantle the structure. All that rage poured into the circle of no influence, leading to maximum exhaustion for minimum result.
So the shift to sovereignty isn't about solving all their problems.
Not at all. It's about stabilizing the body so that attention naturally returns to the two circles they can affect.
That's the crucial link. Stabilization brings clarity. Clarity allows you to shift your attention.
And sovereignty lives in that middle space, the circle of influence, where we affect outcomes without demanding certainty. This is the difference between shouting into the void
Which is the circle of no influence.
and speaking to someone who can actually hear you, which is the circle of influence.
So let's track their shifts. Samir realized he couldn't control if the other side trusted him.
But he could absolutely control whether he showed up as trustworthy in the negotiation.
That's a shift back to his circle of control.
And Chandra stopped asking, "What do they think of me?" which is no influence, and started asking, "What do I think of my own work?" based on my own standards.
Which is her circle of control. That's the stable ground she was looking for externally.
And Lucas stopped fighting the system as a monolith. He started working with the people inside it, focusing on building collaboration. He moved from critique to construction.
It's a precise shift, not a passive one.
It requires an active choice, but from a grounded place. When the body stops bracing, the mind naturally stops reaching for what it can't hold.
Okay, so now that we've seen the mechanism, which is the bracing and the location of the wasted energy, the circle of no influence, let's return to the most practical intervention.
The call-in practice.
It's not a magic cure, but it is that essential bridge. It creates space between the stimulus and our habitual, often unhelpful response.
It creates that critical split-second pause where choice can actually enter the picture. Let's walk through it with that clipped text message scenario.
Okay, so I get the text, call me later. It's short, the response was delayed, my gut immediately clenches, I start generating stories.
Okay, first step, check the story. This means recognizing the narrative that formed faster than thought. Your body has already written the story. They're angry, I did something wrong, this is bad. The fact is 4 words, call me later. The rest of it, the anger, rejection, fault, is your addition. It's a reflex from the past, not a present fact. You have to consciously label the narrative as a story.
That is the hardest part, I think. Because when my body is braced, the story feels so true. How do I check it when the internal conviction is 100%?
You focus on the factual input. The input was 4 words. Your reaction is a paragraph of fear. The discrepancy between those two is the evidence that the story needs checking. You ask yourself, is this story true or is this reaction just familiar?
Okay. Assuming I've done that, I've checked the story and seen the gap. Second step, acknowledge the impulse.
Yes, you feel the strong urge. In this case, maybe the impulse is to immediately text back, what's wrong? Are you mad at me? What did I do? You feel that urgency to defend or over-explain.
The key is feeling the urgency without obeying it.
Exactly. Chandra's example is perfect here. She felt the urge to send that long apologetic email, but she chose to just acknowledge it. I feel a powerful need to defend myself right now. And then did something else.
She took a walk.
She took a walk. It allows the physiological urgency to dissipate. The impulse is just information about what your nervous system thinks is necessary for safety. You honor it without giving it the controls.
The third step feels like the most powerful one. Locate the state. Locating your internal state physically before you locate the story you tell about life.
This is about identifying the physical signs of protection mode. For Samir, it was the tight chest and shallow breath. For you, getting that text, where is the tension? Is it a high, fast breath? Is it a clenched jaw? You ground the experience in the body.
If my breath is rapid and my shoulders are up by my ears,
You're in a protection state. And a protection state cannot perceive accurately. It can only perceive threat.
Lucas's shift happened because of this. A colleague gently signaled he was bracing for battle. That allowed him to realize, I'm not in the right state for wise advocacy, I'm in the state for combat.
And finally, move wisely, choosing the next right action from a grounded place, or just waiting until you can find that ground. Samir, instead of defending, took a breath, located his state, and asked a clarifying, non-accusatory question.
And Chandra, after her walk, wrote a brief, simple acknowledgement, not a defensive novel. In our text message example, moving wisely might just mean waiting 10 minutes.
Or simply replying, okay, talk soon. You choose curiosity over fear.
The power of calm is creating that gap where choice becomes possible.
It doesn't eliminate the initial reactivity, but it allows the sovereign part of you to choose the next right action, rather than letting a conditioned reflex take over. Imperfect practice of this is the transformation.
So let's integrate all of this now. The shift from that narrowed perception to a wider clarity. It's rarely some big dramatic event, is it?
No, it's a quiet loosening. It often begins when the body, through the work of calm, just starts bracing a little bit less. We can map these shifts onto the 6 levels of the pathway to sovereignty.
Let's start with Samir's path, the man trapped by that filter of mistrust.
Samir lived intensely in survival with that hypervigilance, constantly scanning for danger. He moved into seeking stability through rigid routines and defensive strategies, which ultimately just made things worse.
His key shift began with self-awareness.
Right. When the mediator helped him recognize the constant expectation of betrayal, he realized he was guarding himself from something that was already in the past.
And that awareness let him move into integrity. He started to communicate more directly and honestly rather than assuming the worst and retaliating preemptively.
And that change in his internal state softened the whole dynamic. The movement toward wholeness for him meant he could discern trustworthiness without the distortion of his past wounds. And freedom showed up as responsive trust, not rigid fear.
Okay, next, Chandra's path, the woman driven by the fear of judgment.
Chandra was deep in survival with her internal spiraling. Her seeking stability showed up as that relentless overperformance, trying to force external validation.
Which is always unstable ground.
Always. Self-awareness arrived for her when she applied that first step of calm. She paused before interpreting her colleagues' words. The friend's gentle observation, "Not everything is about you," was a huge trigger for that awareness.
She moved into integrity by having honest conversations. But the massive shift into wholeness came when she realized others' behavior reflected their internal state, not her value.
And freedom for Chandra showed up as a quiet steadiness. The ability to receive difficult feedback without collapsing into self-blame. She finally possessed her own worth.
And finally, Lucas's path, the man battling the filter of oppression.
Lucas's survival state was pure rage at systems, his body wired for combat. His seeking stability was trying to force solutions through intensity, which only led to exhaustion.
Self-awareness was unlocked when his exhaustion forced him to look at the cost of his strategy. He realized his anger was a shield protecting him from the vulnerable work of actually engaging with complexity.
His shift toward integrity meant discerning what was genuinely within his circle of influence. He stopped trying to change the whole system and started working with the people inside it.
He moved from blame to responsibility.
Exactly. Wholeness arrived when he stopped seeing institutions as monolithic enemies and started seeing them as collections of complex people working within constraints. And freedom for him arrived as agency, the capacity to build, not just resist.
So in every single case, the environment itself didn't change overnight.
The crucial factor was that their nervous systems changed. Samir, Chandra, and Lucas all saw the world through the state they were in.
Clarity is not what happens when life becomes easier.
Clarity was what happens when the body stops bracing. The nuance, the possibility, the collaboration, it was always there, but it was just invisible through the lens of threat.
That distinction. Clarity is not what happens when life becomes easier. Clarity is what happens when the body stops bracing, is the final reflection we want to offer you. The world softens when you stop expecting it to harm you. So just take a moment now, a guided pause right before we close out. Notice your breath. Notice your shoulders. Is there any tightness there? Is there any willingness for your jaw or your chest to just loosen, even by a millimeter?
That willingness, that micro-softening is the opening.
And we invite you to notice one area in your own life where fear has shaped your perception more than the actual facts warrant.
Is it a persistent financial worry? A difficult relationship? A general distrust? Use that awareness as your starting point.
And if these concepts of inner shifts and locating your state resonate with you, we do have several resources available to support your journey back towards steadiness.
We specifically recommend our free guided somatic experience. It's called Where Am I on the Staircase to Sovereignty? This practice really guides you to feel where you are on the pathway, helping you hear what your body reveals when perception narrows.
It helps you locate your state.
Exactly. It brings what we talked about today directly into your physical awareness.
And for daily support in building that calm practice, we recommend the journal, Your Path to Knowing Yourself in a Changing World. It's a 21-day journey back to inner steadiness, helping you practice checking the story and moving wisely.
These frameworks are really just companions for this ongoing work. The work isn't about eliminating challenges, but about transforming our capacity to meet them with steadiness.
When you learn to see yourself with steadiness, the world begins to reflect it back.
Climb the staircase, breath by breath, with compassion and presence we rise from stress, from fear to peace, from shame to grace. Climb the staircase to sovereignty. When you feel unsafe, too much to bear, you shut down a flare, you vanish or glare, your heart beats fast, your breath runs tight, you just want out or to make it right. That's survival, the you that just wants to survive.
What you feel is complete powerlessness, a cry for safety, not for success.
Climb the staircase,